Hi, Matteo. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you.
I normally start off with the same sort of question, really, and that's what musical projects are you working on at the moment?
Well, the first one is a second solo album, that's for sure. I would like to recording in the summer and maybe having it by the end of this year will be perfect. I don't know if I will be able to do it, but let's see. So this is the first project, and then I have some other stuff where I will be like some guest solos here and there, but the main project is the second album. Yeah.
And obviously, can you give me a little bit of information about your background? How you develop your playing style?
Oh yeah. I started playing when I was around 10 years old, and because my father is also a guitar player, I started playing with fingers because I always saw him playing classical guitar. He's also a classical guitar player. But he plays pretty much a lot of stuff from jazz to pop. He was also a producer back in the 90s. So he's an extremely versatile player. And I wanted to be like him in a way. Like he's able to play jazz, he's able to play Django Reinhardt kind of stuff. And he also plays in distortion. It's the complete package. But the first time I began to be interested in guitar, it was because he was playing a classical guitar piece, and I just thought that every guitar was meant to play with fingers. That's why I started like that. I didn't know that you should use a pick for electric and fingers with classical. I didn't know about this difference. Um, so that's why I began to develop this kind of technique. First of all, it was kind of a bass technique when I first started because I was playing only like that with just two fingers. Later on, I developed this three fingers thing thanks to the classical guitar, and then I also developed my thumb. But that it came with time. I was adding one finger more with time, and yeah, that was it pretty much. So I started actually with the electric, and then I moved a little bit to the classical guitar when I was around 14 years old, because I was at the high school. And in my high school, you were able to play only classical guitar. There wasn't electric guitar, so I was forced to study classical guitar. Yeah, and that was pretty much my background, I think.
So you actually had sort of formal classical guitar lessons then?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, my classical guitar teacher, I was studying with him when I started at 14 years old. I finished around like 18, 19 years old when I finished high school, basically. So that was the period where I was studying a lot of classical guitar. But I wasn't really a good student. I was really into the shred world, Paul Gilbert, Malmsteen, this kind of guys back when I was a teenager, especially. So I was kind of taking the best of both worlds. And I wasn't really a good sight reader also, because when I was studying classical guitar, sometimes I was really used to um, check the pieces on YouTube and hear them and maybe like learn them with my ear rather than just with the score music. And it's something you don't want to do with classical guitar, because one of the benefits of studying classical guitar is actually that you are able to read very well with time. Um, but that wasn't the case for me. So yeah.
I think often if someone has a very musical ear, the reading can actually be a bit of a sort of a block to progressing. It's almost like, well, I'll learn it quicker if I listen.
Yeah, yeah, that was my case because my ear was already developed a lot, especially during the first years, because I was learning everything by ear. Like I was hearing something that my father would play, and I was able to play it immediately by ear most of the time. But then when it comes to reading, I was so slow, and that was frustrating to me because I was aware that if I would be able to listen to that song, I would be able to learn it in like 10 minutes rather than just 2 hours. And that's why I didn't really develop a good sight reading skills. Like,
With your right hand technique, is it slightly different to when you play electric to when you play classical?
Oh yeah, when you play electric, you have way less string spacing. Like well, the string spacing on the classical guitar is a lot more, so you have more space to do more movements, let's say. With the electric guitar, you need to be able to work on the economy of motion sometimes, because you don't need to have a lot of volume with the electric guitar because you have distortion, you have the amp, of course. So you are able to play very soft with your right hand. That's not the case with the classical guitar. You need to develop a lot of volume, a lot of strength on the right hand. And because of that, the movement itself is a little bit wider on the classical guitar. Like sometimes if I have to do this technique on classical guitar, it's a little bit like that. On the other hand, with the electric, is more like that. It's like a small movement because I know that I don't need to have a lot of volume. So I usually play soft with the electric guitar and maybe a little bit harder with the classical. So this is the main difference for me. And then I prefer to have, when it comes to the electric guitar, I prefer to have not very long nails. I prefer to have short nails for the electric guitar. And these are my nails right now. They're not very long. I usually keep them very short. And that's because I feel that when you have long nails with the electric guitar, they kind of get in the way sometimes. And that's not the case with the classical guitar because you have more space in between the strings. So this is like the difference for me. And another thing I should say is that with electric guitar, if you use natural nails, they will tear down with time. They will consume a lot. That's not the case with nylon strings, of course. So when I have to play electric guitar, I usually have 3 fake nails here. So these are not my real nails. They are fake acrylic nails. And that's because they are a lot stronger than the natural nail. This is the only natural nail I use because the time it doesn't consume a lot. I don't use it all the time like these 3, you know? And because of that, I learned to use acrylic with time. And I think it's the best solution if you want to play electric guitar with fingers. Yeah.
They are almost opposite instruments, aren't they? The classical guitar is a very quiet instrument that you have to produce the volume with, and the electric guitar is potentially a very loud instrument that you have to control the noise with. So how do you do that while playing fingerstyle?
Well, of course, the short answer will be a lot of practicing, but long answer is I think it's a different approach with the right hand sometimes, because if I have to mute the strings with the electric guitar, and this happens quite a lot, I tend to play not like that. Let's say that these are the strings. With classical guitar, I play more like that. And but the angle on the electric guitar is more like that because I have my palm available. I have this side of my hand available for muting the strings. So with the electric guitar, I play more perpendicular with the strings, let's say. With the classical guitar, I have a more traditional approach. So this is the case when I have to mute the strings. And sometimes I also use a rubber band on the strings with the electric guitar. There are these things called groove gear fret wrap. I don't know if you know them, and it usually helped me having these things, especially when you're playing with a lot of distortion, you know, and especially if you are using a lot of tapping and you don't have the side of the hand available when you tap. So this can be useful, um, especially on a recording setting when you want to be everything quiet. So yeah.
You mentioned that your father was a big influence on your playing. Who were the other sort of players that really got you inspired when you were starting out?
First influences were for sure rock guys, people like Jimi Hendrix, Richie Blackmore was a big influence at the start. I was listening a lot of Deep Purple, Led Zeppelin for sure. So the first influences were pretty much the 70s, 60s rock guys. For me, I think the first jazz influence was Wes Montgomery because he is one of my favorite guitar players of my father. So he was listening a lot of Wes, and I was listening back to him, you know. And I always say that my father was more like a listening guide rather than a teacher for me, because one of the one of the first things he told me was, you should listen to this guy, you should listen to this other guy. And I kind of got back in time thanks to this. First of all, I was hearing a lot of these players, especially the 80s players when I was a teenager, like Van Allen, Steve Vai, Joe Satriani. And my father was always saying to me, you know, these guys didn't invent everything. You should go back in time and listen to the other cats. And because of that, I discovered Joe Pass, Wes Montgomery, Barney Kessel, Django, especially. It was great because of that, because I had the chance to go back in time and listen back to, you know, the original ideas, let's say. So yeah, these were the first influences, and the jazz influences were later on, where I discovered the fusion stuff. And I was very passionate about these guys that were playing, you know, in between jazz and fusion, like jazz and rock. And one of my favorite was for sure Frank Gambale. It's one of the first ones I listened. Scott Anderson, huge influence, John Scofield, you know, all these kind of guys that were able to play jazz and rock in a convincing way. And I was, you know, I wanted to be like that in a way. I wanted to play through the changes. I wanted to have the jazz vocabulary, uh, but I wanted to play in distortion too because it's really fun to me. It's one of the funniest parts of guitar playing to me. So I wanted to be able to fuse these two worlds, and that's why I began to study jazz standards. I began to transcribe more, and that was after the classical guitar high school period. And yeah,
So you often transcribe solos by other instruments as well, rather than just guitar.
I began to transcribe when I was around 18, 19, when I first started the conservatory, because after the high school, I began to study jazz guitar at the conservatory in Palermo. And that's when people started to say to me, you should transcribe more. You should transcribe this guy and this other guy. And one of the first ones I transcribed was actually Joe Pass. And I remember I'm not a really big fan of Virtuoso, I have to say, the album by Joe Pass. Not because it's not good, but because I believe there are albums where Joe Pass plays in a more relaxed way when he is in a trio setting, like double bass and drums. He can play very incredible single note lines, and I was really interested to that. You know, I wasn't interested to the chord melody traditional jazz stuff. I was more interested to the vocabulary, like single note soloing. And because of that, I transcribed a lot of solos of Joe Pass in a trio setting. And that were the first solos I learned. And then Michael Brecker came, and that was way harder than I expected. Like being able to translate saxophone things on guitar I think it was one of the hardest things I ever done on guitar. It's for sure. Like the fingering, the phrases, the direction of the phrases are like non-guitaristic things. And because of that, you have like to shift your mind a little bit, and but that was useful for sure. Michael Brecker was another one that I transcribed a lot. Scott Anderson, I transcribed a lot of stuff from Scott. Schofield also, like a lot of diminished vocabulary was thanks to Scott Anderson and Schofield. Bob Mintzer is another one of my favorite sax players. Yellow Jackets for sure. So I began to transcribe a lot, but one thing I have to say against transcribing is that sometimes you don't memorize the whole solo. You just memorize some little fragments that stuck with yourself. Like I I transcribed like, you know, a lot of solos, but I'm not able to play from start to end now right now because it's so hard to memorize them all. So when you transcribe and you finish and and you recorded it and so on, you actually learn some little things from the transcription. That's why you need to transcribe a lot in order to get the most out of it. But yeah, for me, you really remember some phrases, not the entire transcriptions.
And I suppose those things you absorb and they almost become yours after a while.
Yeah, sometimes you force yourself to like play a lick, play a phrase because you want to, integrate it in your playing, you want to be able to internalize better. And that was the same thing with English, actually. When I was learning English at school, I was like forcing myself to utilize some phrases that I was not, that they were strange to me, but I was forcing myself to, um, speak in a different way sometimes. I think it's the same kind of, you need to have the same kind of discipline when you are learning music in a way, because it's basically a different language. And the same way I learn English, I basically learned English through interviews on YouTube. I didn't learn it like by books and all of that. And the same thing applies to guitar sometimes. I'm not really a book guy. Like I don't have any jazz books available here. My father has some of them, but himself, he says that he didn't learn a lot from paper. He learned a lot through playing with recordings, try to learn a lot of things by ear, so you develop this kind of stuff. And I think the same thing applies when you're learning the language, especially jazz, improvisational music. You need to go on jam session, you need to go on places where you absorb a lot of stuff. And that's why people that travel a lot are usually better with speaking foreign languages, because they absorb the language where in the place where they speak it.
I suppose the fact it sounds like you have always had a very varied and eclectic musical diet. And I think that's one of the reasons you're able to be quite free musically now. It's just because you've listened to a lot. You haven't just listened to one thing.
Yeah, I listen a lot. I try to get the most out of my listening process. And sometimes, it's almost like you need to find the right balance between listening to new things and explore along with just your guitar. Because right now my practice sessions are a little bit different from what I used to play when I was a teenager. Like when I was a teenager, I was having a lot of free time. Like you have like 8 hours available. I wasn't doing any homework, so just guitar for me. And right now I have way less free time. So I try to play 4 hours every day. Sometimes it's less, sometimes it's more if I am lucky, but it's almost 4 hours every day. Back in the days was like 12 hours sleep, go to school, play again guitar, sleep, and repeat every day. So that you kind of develop different things when you are a teenager. I was developing my technique a lot. Right now, I try to develop more sound, vocabulary. I try to, study more, like internalize the things I already know better rather than learning more things. Because I already know tons of vocabulary informations, and I want to be able to play them in every situation rather than internalize more stuff, rather than learning more stuff and having too much things to think in your head. So right now okay, I have my vocabulary I got down my vocabulary, I have my phrases, I have my language. I want to develop, I want to take like 100% out of it. That's what I'm studying right now, and it's not more. I always studying technique, but it's not only technique. I never study, the chromatic scale up and down all over the neck, because it's not a thing you will play in a real musical situation, you know. So right now I'm more playing. I kind of play more, thinking that I will be able to do that in a real life setting rather than just pure technique.
It's interesting you mentioned about time there because obviously things have really blown up for you over the last couple of years.
Yeah, for sure.
And I know you've been insanely busy this year. Have you got any advice for sort of aspiring musicians as how to manage your time and also to sort of how to cope with the traveling and the gigs suddenly getting bigger when things take off?
Well, yeah, one thing that I force myself to do, and it sounds like it's not an important thing, but when you have a lot of gigs, it's actually, I think, one of the most important things, and eat healthy. This is the most important thing for me. When I'm traveling a lot, try to eat healthy. Don't underestimate your health just because you are young. And um, you need to pay attention to some stuff, especially when you're traveling for a long time. And I wasn't really used to that because back last year, for example, I was having a lot of gigs, but not like this year. Like this year is like you are out for 1 week or more, and you have to stay in shape for more than 1 week, sometimes even 1 month. And last year was like, okay, we have this gig here, one shot, and then the day after we go back home. So it was a little bit easier to manage. So right now I try to play guitar every day, because not only because I want to improve, but also because to keep your chops up, you know, to keep yourself in a good way, because you have to play almost every week in front of people. And I can't, you know, even if some days I don't like to play guitar every day. Sometimes I just want to do something else, you know. But this year I can't really do that because I need to be in shape every day. And it's positive because of course I love to play guitar, but last year was a more relaxed approach, you know. If I didn't feel that I wanted to play guitar today, I just didn't do it, you know. Right now I can't really do that anymore, but it's positive for me, you know.
Because it's not just that you're playing in front of audiences now, you're also playing next to Steve Vai and next to Joe Bonamassa in front of an audience.
Yeah, yeah, and that's stressful for sometimes, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a really good way to challenge yourself, like to study more and be more in focus. But one thing that changed this year is that now I practice because I have to, and sometimes not because I want to. You know, that this is a thing that changed. But I mean, it's a positive thing. The only thing you can't do anymore if that it is it that if you don't feel you want to play guitar today, you really can't. You have to play. That's one thing that changed for sure. Yeah.
Also, the influence of social media, because obviously that's helped you with your career in terms of exposure, but it does also mean because of your presence now that whenever you're performing, there's an expectation and people are filming it and you probably know it's going to be posted.
Oh yeah. You know, because of that, I try to work more on my own songs. Like sometimes if I have to practice something, I think, okay, I have to play live this thing. I want to practice this song more so I have more ideas on this song because I have to play it 100 times this year. And sometimes because I improvise a lot, sometimes it's hard to keep up with new ideas every day and every day. So there's this song called Silk Road in my album, and the solo section is just one chord. It's like a F sharp vamp. It's kind of a harmonic minor vibe, like Malmsteen kind of stuff, but you can use some other scales as well. And the hard thing for me is to find new ideas because I was, you know, if you play like one, 2, 3 gigs a month, it's okay to have like 5 ideas. But if you have just like 5 ideas and you play every day the same at the same song, and it will become sterile and it will become boring after a while. So because of that, because I know there are a lot of people will be filming, I try to, play different things every day, every night. This is the hardest thing actually for me, being able to improvise fresh and new ideas with the same songs. And also because of that, I don't really like the idea that everyone is filming all the time. There are people that they actually uploaded the whole concert on YouTube. I was able to take down one of the videos, but then the same YouTube channel uploaded the same concert by dividing it into like smaller videos. So you have the whole concert, but in 10 videos. And I was like, okay, you win. But you have to be able to, I think, live with that. And because now, social media is the new way to promote yourself. And actually, if people record yourself the phone, record yourself playing on the phone, it would be sometimes useful for promotion. But I don't like the idea that everything is on YouTube right now. Because if you have the whole concert on YouTube, why you have to come to my concert? You can watch it on YouTube, So this is the negative thing of social media.
So you're a Yamaha endorsee and you use their RevStar guitar. What first attracted you to that instrument?
Well, it first began when it was, I think it was in 2017. They first contacted me in 2017. And I was playing, my favorite guitar back then was a Gibson SG. And it was a gift from my 14th birthday, I remember. So it was basically the guitar I was using all the time. First, because it was light, it was small, and I really like small guitars because I'm not a big person. So the SG was really comfortable for me. And of course, I like the sound of the SG, the sound of the mahogany, a lot of mid-range. And I'm a big fan of Eric Johnson, so I was also searching for that kind of distorted tone. Like really, there's distortion, but not too much. And plus, it's not really aggressive. And I like that kind of distortion. They contacted me in 2017 and I tried to make some videos with the Rapster. One of the first ones was a version of the chicken I did with my trio. It was one of the first videos that went viral on YouTube. And thanks to that, we began this relationship. And I started playing the Rapster because it was really similar to the SG. And plus, it was a little bit more versatile because I was able to play some of the jazz stuff I was playing thanks to the Rapster, because the clean tone for me was a little bit more reliable than the SG tone. It was a little bit less aggressive, and I like this kind of stuff because I always play with the neck pickup just clean. I don't like the distortion with the neck pickup because it sounds too muddy for me. So I don't need a really high output neck pickup for my guitars because I only use distortion with the bridge pickup. So the Rapstar was having this kind of balance for me. So that's why I started playing this kind of guitars. And then I discovered in 2019 that Yamaha was asking me for a custom version of the Rapstar, like made by my specifications and all of stuff. And we were able to do this custom version in 2019, and I was really happy with that because it's just a regular Rapstar, but with some modifications like locking tuners, and you can split also the humbuckers. So it was kind of a boutique version, let's say, of the Rapstar model. It is still my first guitar I play, and I recorded most of the lead playing on the album is recorded with this Rapstar here. Maybe I can bring it to you. I can maybe because I have it on the other room just to see it. It's okay for you?
Yeah, definitely. Love to see it. Yeah.
So this is pretty much a regular Rapster. Um, the only thing I changed the pickups. This is the most recent change, and these are the Marzio Puff. It's the anniversary version of the 59 version of Puffs. So it's anniversary 59. Then you have this plastic thing in between the pickups. So this is just to hold my thumb, rest my thumb here when I'm playing with this kind of technique. So it's just, utilitaristic that it doesn't affect the tone. And other things, this is the groove gear I was telling you before, just to mute the strings a little bit when I'm playing tapping and all that stuff. And here you have locking tuners. And that's pretty much the Rapster. So it is a really light guitar because it has also everything is chambered here. So here you can hear a little bit the chambered body. So it's mahogany. I don't remember the top, but it's pretty much everything mahogany. And here I have this carve. On the regular Rapstar, you have this you have more wood here basically. So they carve the wood here, so it's more accessible on the higher frets. Yeah. Here you have like a split you can use. And that's pretty much it. This is the reps that I use all the time. I was searching for a traditional color, nothing fancy. So it's just regular kind of guitar. So yeah, and here you can read like custom made for Matteo in 2019. Yeah.
It's a beautiful guitar. It's just sort of very simple, but does almost everything.
Yeah. For me, it's the perfect guitar, especially for my music. As I told you, the pickup selection for me right now is perfect because I was searching for a neck pickup that was good also with the jazz stuff. So this combination of the Marzio for me is the best choice right now. And yeah, and that's pretty much the guitar I use 90% of the time. Yeah.
And what do you use for amplification and effects and things like that?
Well, I'm a big fan of digital amp modeling. First of all, because I'm a lazy guy and I didn't want to bring the amp live. So when I was gigging a lot in this area in Palermo, when I was gigging without taking the airplane, basically, and because of that, I wanted to bring just the guitar and the pedal board. So I pretty much use Line 6 products for that. When I can't bring the big Helix, I use most of the time the Helix floor, and it's the bigger version. It's the biggest version you have of the Helix because you also have the volume pedal available, the expression pedal available. But when I'm traveling, this pedal board is too big, so for most of my gigs, I use the Helix Stomp or the Stomp XL when you have like more buttons available. And I pretty much use the simulation of the amp on these pedal boards here. I tried a lot of stuff like IRs or stock cabinets. Sometimes the IRs are better. Sometimes the stock cabinets can also sound good, but you need to know the machine really well in order to get a good tone, of course. And yeah, so this is the things I use most of the time when I'm playing live. Yeah.
And do you think we've reached the point now where the modeling technology is so good that there really isn't a difference anymore?
Well, if you can use it in a good way, yes. The thing is that with the amp, you kind of have a better starting point. Like when you plug in the amp, it's already when you want to be. You don't need to dial in everything, you know, you don't need to touch so many stuff. So it's an advantage for if you are searching for a traditional kind of tone. But if you are like, for example, a jazz player and you only need one clean, why you need to bring a pedal board that has like 400 different amps available? You just need one amp. And that's when I have to say it's better just one amp with a bunch of pedals and that's it. But if you need a lot of different sounds and maybe you like a lot of Marshall with distortion, but you like Fender with cleans, and you need to have like delay, different reverbs and stuff, that's when the digital stuff, I think it's better because you have like basically infinite amount of rig and gear on just one pedal board. So if your music, if you play like distortion and then clean and then a different kind of clean, like I have a wide variety of sounds during my concerts. So I think for my music, it's better to have just one pedal board to play everything. And of course, I think with the amp modeling we have now, it's basically indistinguishable from the amp counterpart. So I'm a big fan of, it's better to have less stuff on the stage, but knowing them really good rather than have like 100 different pedals, but not knowing them really, really good, you know? It's better to have less things, but you know really well the thing you have on your feet. Rather than just a lot of stuff. So that's why I concentrated myself on knowing a lot about the Helix and my pedal board, rather than just buying different amps and trying a lot of stuff. Because sometimes we guitar players, we get into the trap that if we try more stuff, we will get to our ideal tone. But sometimes it's just a matter of, knowing the stuff you already have in a more in a deep way, let's say. So that's why I think in order to get the most out of my Helix, I have to know everything about the Helix. Yeah.